always, from the heart of the city, and now on demand 24/7 on the CHFI website. This is the soundtrack to accompany a fresh future. And I'm Don Jackson, around the world on the internet. John Anderson in The Second Journey wrote, "There is more hope in a fresh future. A new season has begun, one in which I will let some fields lie fallow, while others will be prepared for planting." Unquote. I seem to identify with that sentiment at this, the start of a new decade. Some simple but powerful thoughts for the start of a new year, 2010, with Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. John Mayer, Waiting on the World to Change, and Sting in Fields of Gold. I'm Don Jackson. Happy New Year. This is Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. I'd like you to think back to some powerful lessons learned over the course of a lifetime. Anne Lamott from Traveling Mercies, published by Pantheon, wrote, "I always imagined when I was a kid that adults had some inner toolbox full of shiny tools. The hammer of wisdom, the saw of discernment, the sandpaper of patience. But when I grew up, I found that life handed you these rusty, bent old tools. Friendships, prayer, conscience, honesty, and said, do the best you can with these. They'll have to do. Mostly against all odds, they're enough." Anne Lamott from Traveling Mercies, published by Pantheon. And this truth from Madeleine L'Engle in Walking on Water. She wrote, and I quote, "When we were children, we used to think that when we were grown up, we would no longer be vulnerable. But to grow up is to accept vulnerability. To be alive is to be vulnerable." Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Miley Cyrus with The Climb, and Jason Mraz, and I'm Yours. I'm Don Jackson, and a Happy New Year to you and your family from Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Gladys Tabor in the Still Meadow Daybook wrote, and I quote, "In grief, one can endure the day, just the day. But when one also tries to bear the grief ahead, one cannot compass it. As for happiness, it can only be the ability to experience the moment. It is not next year that life will be so flawless. And if we keep trying to wait for next year's happiness, the river of time will wind past, and we shall not have lived at all." Gladys Tabor in the Still Meadow Daybook. Martha Graham knew the power of the moment when she said, "Dance is the hidden language of the soul. So true. Ever get the sense that our souls merge when we dance with our partner? And Grace Hansen wrote, "Don't be afraid your life will end. Be afraid that it will never begin." Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Tim McGraw and Live Like You Were Dying. Leona Lewis, Happy, and Savage Garden, Truly, Madly, Deeply. And thank you for your continued support of Lovers and Other Strangers. My son has developed an appreciation for the music of the Beatles. Over the past few months, he's become a huge fan of their music, and it has a lot to do with a very popular video game. Just the other night, there was a documentary on television that featured some behind-the-scenes audio of them in the recording studio. It gave my son a better appreciation of how the music was made. There was also a segment on their journey to India in search of enlightenment, which gave me pause to consider this. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote, "There is no need to go to India or anywhere else to find peace. You will find that deep place of silence right in your room, your garden, or even your bathtub." The words of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And Rachel Naomi Remen wrote, "A loving silence often has far more power to heal and to connect than the most well-intentioned words." Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. The Moody Blues, Tuesday Afternoon, Lights to Drive My Soul, and John Lennon, Imagine. I'm Don Jackson with Lovers and Other Strangers. Helen Keller believed no pessimist ever discovered the secret of the stars, or sailed to an uncharted land, or opened a new doorway for the human spirit. The poet Sarah Teasdale wrote, "I make the most of all that comes, and the least of all that goes." Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Michael Jackson and This Is It, and James Blunt and You're Beautiful. I thought this appropriate to wrap up the hour. It's an Irish toast for a new year that I heard many years ago in the past. In the new year, may your right hand always be stretched out in friendship, but never in want. Happy New Year from Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Good night, sweet dreams. I'm Don Jackson.